Hey, this is Roland with Black Swan team at Remax and Alicia, and I want to introduce Charlie Malolo. He's a friend of mine and also a great attorney in the area, works in estate planning. Today we're going to talk about estate planning, and at the end, there's a special surprise because Charlie is phenomenal at guitar because I want to set him up.
Building expectations.
Oh yeah, really oversell. So anyway,
So we wanted to bring Charlie on because I know that especially after people make a large purchase like real estate, I was actually just telling Charlie before we got on that I actually had an old past client reach out to me recently saying, I just bought this house. I heard that I should get like a will or something. You know, people just don't know what the next step is, if that's something that's even needed. And so we brought Charlie on today to kind of talk about what he does and kind of tell us a little bit more about estate planning and the good, bad, and ugly about everything.
yeah. So tell us what services you provide and like what you do mainly.
Okay, so I do estate planning, and so that's kind of a lot of people don't even know what that means. But if you think wills and trusts, right, and all of the documents that kind of flow out of that. So really, it's about like, what are we going to do with your stuff when you can no longer tell us what you want to do with your stuff, right? And that's what I do. I focus on that, and that's about 90% of my practice. And then because of that, I also do some probate work where we're actually dealing with people after they've died, getting that stuff to the people they want it to. And then because I used to own a title company, I do a little bit of real estate work here and there. And estate planning kind of naturally flows into some business organization work as well. So that's kind of everything that I do all in one. But mainly what I focus on is that will and trust piece, helping people get their documents in order so that we know what to do with your stuff when you can't tell us what to do.
Okay. And so how long have you been in the area working?
I'm actually moved to McKinney right out of law school. So I've been here for almost 9 years. It's been about 8 years at this point. So.
All right. Is there something that drove you to liking this particular aspect of law?
Yeah, I think that it's, like when you first get out, you try everything. You try to find out where you can fit. But I think for me, wills and trusts was a good fit, mainly because for me it was obvious that you need a will. Everybody always asks that question, do I need a will? And I always tell everybody needs a will. And for me, the thing that kind of drove me, like made that stick for me is, my dad died when I was 7, right? And he was only 40 years old, and I'll be 40 next year, right? So people think, oh, I'm young, I don't need anything, but like death can happen at any time, and we all will die at some point, and you're never going to know when that's going to be, right? Things happen. Healthy people die, old people die, and people think, oh, well, I'm not very old, but I've had friends just get hit by semis and they're just gone. And it happens every day, and you never know if you're going to be the one. And if you're young, statistically, it's unlikely, but it's devastating if you're young and you have family and kids and you don't have anything, right? It's devastating even if you're single, right? And your family has to clean up the mess of all of your property, right? So everybody needs to have their paperwork in order, because if you don't have the paperwork, we have to do a bunch of extra processes in the probate court to finalize your estate, get control over all of your property, and be able to actually do something with it, right? Nothing happens until the court signs off. And if you don't have your paperwork in order, that process is lengthened and is more expensive. Right? So it's much better if you at least have something in order to let us know, what do you want to do, right?
Yeah.
That's what estate planning is really about.
Okay. Does that connect in with life insurance at all?
It does connect to life insurance, and that's actually a really important area that I always try to talk about when I talk publicly, because life insurance for kids, right? Like, like even a couple like yourselves, you probably have your life insurance thinking, if we're out on a date and we're both gone, this life insurance can take care of our kids. Our brother, sister, whatever can step in and be guardians, but this life insurance money is going to let them go to school. It's going to take care of all those extra needs, all that kind of stuff. But life insurance usually skips your will, right? It's a contract that you have with your life insurance company. But if you name a child as a beneficiary, right, the life insurance company can't cut a check to a child. They're not allowed to. Right. So usually what they say is they tell whoever it is that's trying to get the money for the child, oh, well, we'll pay it to the estate of the child, which basically means we want you to go to the court, have a really expensive court process, and have the court monitor this money so that we don't have any liability. Right. So and that's almost always what happens, because people just think, well, my first beneficiary is my spouse. Second beneficiary is going to be my children. Right? That's what everybody thinks, but your children can't be a beneficiary. So usually what we do when we plan for people is we create a little trust that you can pay to inside your will, or we create an actual trust plan, right? But basically, we call it a contingent trust in the legal world, but it's also called a testamentary trust. But basically for the average person, all they need to know is a trust inside your will, right? And you need to point your life insurance to that for your kids, because if it's pointed to the trust created under my will, right, now the life insurance company is going to cut a check to your executor, right, the person you put in charge, and they'll use that money in trust for your children until they reach whatever age you pick. Right? That's a much better system, and that's what most people probably would want. You've got some people you trust to care for the money for your children until they reach the right age, but you also put them under legal restrictions so they don't own it outright, right? But it's for your kids legally, but they get to be in charge of it and determine how that's going to get divvied out until your kids reach. Usually people pick 25, but it can be whatever age you want. Right.
Yeah, I never understood that before. The insurance component needing to have to go.
Yeah, it's actually a huge problem. I've taken some CEs for insurance agents, and they do teach it to the insurance agents, but a lot of insurance agents just, they haven't really heard of it, and they haven't really thought about it. But it's a huge problem, and it's something that everybody needs to make sure they have updated. Right. Go in and you change that from children to trust under my will, or if you have a trust, a revocable trust, you pay it to that revocable trust, because you don't want your kids to inherit it. I've actually seen this one time where I did a guardianship for a kid, and as soon as he turned 18, he wanted that money. The judge was like, hey, maybe we should hold it. And the kid's like, well, I'm an adult, I'm gonna take it. And they took the money. And hopefully he was responsible with it, but he was 18 years old with a lot of money, So it's a dangerous situation, and it's easily prevented just by doing the right paperwork in the right order.
Yeah. So is there any other big red flags people should know about?
Yes. Yes. The other huge one in estate planning is the blended family. A lot of people just don't think about it, but your second marriage, you've got kids from your first marriage, you come into your second marriage with your new spouse, new life, you buy a new house together, right? And then you die, right? Your kids get half of that house, right? And the idea is that if you don't leave a will or anything like that, right, the government's going to make sure that your kids don't get disinherited. Okay, and they're avoiding that Cinderella situation where the stepmom comes in, takes all the money, and poor Cinderella never gets anything, right? But as much as the government system makes sense, they have to write some rule, and there's no other way to divvy out the property other than to say, well, we'll take this much of this type of property and this much of this type. They just go through all the different things. What ends up happening is the kids end up taking half the house that perhaps your second spouse may have bought, right? But because it was bought during your marriage, it's community property, and you end up taking half of that house. Your kids end up taking half the house, when really, you know, if you wanted to leave your kids, you know, part of your wealth to help them, or, you know, just so they have an inheritance, they probably only need your cash. They don't need your house, right? So you could have left life insurance to them and disinherited them in your will technically, but you left them a ton of life insurance, right? There, you know, anybody I've ever talked to always comes up with some way to take care of their kids, but then leave the house to their second spouse, you know, or some other way. Like I've seen a few situations where second spouse is like, I wouldn't live here. That's fine. You know, you just divvy things up, but like that needs to be addressed, at least, because the way the government has set it up for people, it never works, right? It's one of those rules they have to write for everybody, so it works for nobody.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. No, that's good to know, because a lot of people don't understand. I know I've seen a lot of people talk about wills in general, and they're like, well, I'll just go online and I'll print out my little thing and we'll sign it and it's good. What do you say to that? What does that even stand up in court, or is it like, no, don't do that?
It's a beautiful dream that very ever rarely works out. Right. You can write your own will, and when we take it to court, I've done 2 or 3 of these. I've done 4 or 5 where people created on all the way from like scribbles on a notebook pad to, you know, paid for legal Zoom. Right. And the problem is nobody ever does it right. And, you know, it's like my guitar building, right? I can build my own guitar, but it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work today, right? It doesn't work if you don't do it right. But unlike wills, right? Like, I know the guitar doesn't work because I plugged it in and it's not working, right?
Yeah.
When your will doesn't work, you don't know, because you don't know the situation is going to happen when you die. So that's the really unfortunate thing, right? Like, you don't know what the situation is going to be when you die. And every time I've taken one of these to court, there's always these huge problems that I wish didn't exist, and they wouldn't have existed if they had just used an experienced attorney, right? Any attorney who's done, you know, even 5 wills would have done a better job than they put together, you know. And every time people bring in their wills and say, well, how is this? You know, I'll look in the distributions, right? And they'll have given away, you know, 100% of their house and 100% of their clothes, but like nothing else, right? And so what happens when, you know, your investment account comes into the estate?
Yeah.
You know, there's no direction on that, right? So it's just little tiny things that the law, you know, because it's the law on wills started thousands of years ago. Something they've been debating and arguing over for all this time. And it has all these formalities. It has all of these things that are expected to be in there. And if you miss those things, right, the court isn't going to be lenient on you, you know?
Yeah.
And if there's ever an issue, then it's a huge issue, right? Like, especially like if you've got that blended family where your kids might be trying to take half the house from your second spouse. You know, if you write that provision wrong, which I've seen that one time, if it's written wrong, you know, now all of a sudden children have a claim on the house and it's problematic, right? And you didn't know, like that guy didn't know. The claim came 15 years after he was dead.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, so but he wrote his own will and he felt really good and he probably saved a lot of money. But he probably spent, you know, he probably gave away $125,000 of value on the house to his children instead of to his wife, who bought the house. Because he was, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens, you know, like sometimes your spouse is the only person making money, and they buy the house, and then all of a sudden the children take half of it, right? Because you died and wrote your own will. So like it could be done, but the effort and care required to do it properly would probably take you much more time than if you just went to work and paid for an attorney to do it properly. So
makes sense.
So at what point do you recommend someone get a will? Do you wait until you own property, or like, does it not make sense up until that point? Or is it just kind of everyone, no matter if you have assets or not?
Well, I had one lady come in and she had $400 in her bank account, and that's all she had. And she said, do I need a will? And at the time I was charging $400 for a will. And so I'm like, you know what? Keep your money because you need it, and do a payable on death on your bank account, because that was all she had, right? But like when you start acquiring cars and houses and things like that, you do need it. And if you're making enough money, to pay an attorney to do your estate plan, you should absolutely have one, because it's not just about your property. It is about your property, and certainly if you have a lot of it, you should have a will so people know what's going on. But you also need your medical power of attorney. You need a durable power of attorney. Like kids, when they come out of college and they get their first job and they start making decent money, right? You may end up acquiring $30,000. You may have a nice car. You may end up even buy a house. That kind of thing. As you start acquiring property, right, that could be worth money, that's when you really want your will in place. But also, if you're incapacitated, you should have a durable power of attorney so that whoever you pick comes in and can manage your property while you're incapacitated. You may live another 5 years with brain trauma, right? You need somebody to pay your bills with all that money you've now accumulated, right? Even if, because like if you don't own a house, right, you could go into your bank and you could do a payable on death. Your life insurance is going to go according to your designations. Your retirement accounts will go according to your designations. If you had a TD Ameritrade, you could do a payable on death on that. So if you don't own a house, a lot of the things that you own could transfer automatically without you needing to pony up any money, right? You can do a survivorship agreement on your car even. It's free forms online at the DMV. But when before that, you could think, well, I don't need a will because I have that. But if you lost your capacity to operate, who's going to make your financial decisions? Who's going to make your medical decisions? What happens if your family starts fighting over that, right? Who can even see your medical records, right? Like 18-year-old kids at college, their parents don't technically have a right to see their medical records, right? Sometimes they don't want that, but sometimes they absolutely do, right? They need these documents in place, right? So the problem is you don't know when you're going to need them. So a lot of people think, well, I'll get it when I get a house because then I'm an adult, then I'll be responsible. Or I'll get it when the kids move out and go to college, right? I see 50-year-olds are like, oh, it's finally time to get our will done. And I'm like, it was time 20 years ago, right? When your kids were born, it was time. Like even before that, it was time. But those are usually the triggering events because people are now thinking, well, now it's time to get things in order. This is like going to the dentist, but you'll never get a toothache if you never do it, right? There's no pain to force you in. So usually people come in after a funeral, right? But everybody really needs it because you want to determine who should be in charge of all these decisions that happen, and they're real. I've lost all my parents, all my grandparents, and I've seen this situation so many times. You need to know who's in charge and who's going to do what when, right? And it's as simple as just putting it down on paper in the right order with the right formalities, right? So everybody needs it and everybody should have it today. But there is the reality of like, if you have $400 in the bank, then maybe it's not time for you. But
so if someone's ready to get the process started and they make an appointment to come see you, what kind of documents does someone need to bring? What do they need prepared with when they come to sit down and do all of that?
So it is helpful. Like a lot of attorneys will do like these big long questionnaires and they'll they'll ask about, all of their net worth and all the things. I don't really need that to get started with somebody. I've taken people right off the street and had a whole meeting. But it's helpful when people come in for their first meeting if they know generally who they want to put in charge and if they have addresses and phone numbers for those people. But if they do none of those things, I could still do their first meeting and get them. And sometimes they don't really know who those people might be until they've had the attorney. And I do have some advice for people when they don't know who it should be. I give them a little bit of ideas on how you figure out who the right people are, right?
Okay.
So the answer is nothing, but there are a few things that are helpful if they have them.
Okay.
Right. So.
Okay.
Down the road, will there be documents that you will need in order to get it executed?
No, if you have sometimes people have a second house in some random small town in Texas, that's 500 miles away. In that case, sometimes I need a deed in order to be able to prepare a deed if we're doing a trust or something like that. But most of the time I don't really need anything extra from people other than the information that they provide me, things that they would know, like your brother's address and phone number, that kind of stuff. I don't really need to see any other documents unless they want me to review their designations or something like that. But that's all on the client. If they want me to review something, I'm happy to do it, but they would provide that to me then. But I generally don't need much from them other than proving that they are them and then making sure I have all the information they want me to put in their documents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like here in Collin County, I can find a deed for somebody in under 5 minutes. So
Okay.
it just depends on what they might want from me. But usually for a normal estate plan, I don't need anything from the client other than their time and their information.
Okay. So speaking of time, how long does this process usually take?
I can get it done as quickly as 3 business days, but it's been closer to 5 when it's busy, so about a week. But if usually I find that a lot of clients don't want to go that quickly, so it depends on the client's pace as well. But I can get it done that quickly if the client is ready to move. It can be done very quickly. So.
And you do all of the back end research by like that as part of your process, going and finding all the extra information.
Yep. Yeah, I take care of all that. So I use a lot of technology that has streamlined my business that allows me to do it fairly efficiently. So I get things done by myself pretty quickly.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
Well, I mean, kind of exhausted my questions.
Is there anything else you can think of that might be of value or importance that we haven't asked?
I would just say that because this is the focus of my business, I've done very many estate plans, and I think that experience has made them better. I think that it's allowed me to streamline a process that is really simple and easy for people. And this is something that gets complicated really quickly, And I also take time in signings to make sure people really know what they're signing. Sometimes that feels tedious to people, but I think generally the response has been, people appreciate that I try to explain it, and I try to explain it in layman's terms.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can understand what you're actually signing instead of I've seen sometimes it's just here, sign this. Here's 100 pages, just sign them and let's get out of here. Even when we're doing this remotely, I have meetings with people where, I'll sit for an hour and just explain it and try to go over every word and make sure people are comfortable with what they're going to sign. That's important. I hate it when I'm clicking, agree to the terms just because I want to watch a news article or something. I hate that. And so I don't like it. So I try not to do that to other people.
Yeah.
So.
And just as long as I've known you, I always know you explain things very clearly and slowly, and your methodic nature I've always appreciated. So
Yeah, I try. I try not to be tedious with it either, but I like to understand things.
Thorough is the way to describe
it. Yeah, I hope other people understand, but I do the best I can.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Now we would love to hear some music.
Okay. Well, can I do a show and tell?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about it.
This is my guitar that I'm currently building. So it's just a guitar kit that comes with everything you need to build it. But it is woodworking and electronics all in one, and like this binding. You actually end up covering this with dye and stain, and you have to scrape it. Like it's amazing how incredibly hard it is to scrape this when you don't know what you're doing. But I finally figured it out, and I think I got a decent line.
It looks pretty good.
Little things like that. Like I watched videos on this, and there's a lot of guitar makers out there, and they'll show you how to do something, and it takes them literally like 15 minutes.
Is it a maple back? Do you know the wood?
I think it's basswood.
Oh, okay.
It's a cheap wood, but it looks pretty when you stain it. Right. But like you'll watch these videos of guys that can do this in 15 minutes, and then I'll try to do it. And like I bought this kit like during Christmas time, and it's April. Still not done. Right. So it's like it'll take me a month to do something I watched somebody do in 10 minutes, literally. Yeah. So it's
they have the advantage of YouTube, so they're fast forwarding stuff.
What?
I said they have the advantage of YouTube, so just fast forwarding.
Oh yeah. But but I feel like it's good because I'm learning more about the guitar, and I'm figuring out like, oh, I did that wrong, or this is how this works, and now when something breaks, I'll be able to fix it because I built it. So that's pretty cool. So yeah. Anyway, that was my show and tell. So
yeah, thanks for sharing.
Let me play a tune for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sure thing.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us. Hopefully people get some questions answered for themselves. And we've been having the phone number scrolling across the bottom. Definitely reach out to Charlie. I know he's a great guy. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.